Most men aren't bad. They're just terrified of being seen as bad. And that fear? It's quietly wrecking their marriages and killing any chance at real intimacy. Today, I sit down with Mikah Jones, a wellness coach who helps men and women break away from people-pleasing patterns they don't even know that they're stuck in. We talk about why so many men are afraid of becoming their fathers, why saying no to your partner can actually be the most loving thing that you can do, and why your body, not your thoughts, is the only real way to measure whether you're living true or not. Mikah explains why you can't borrow peace from meditation or breath work, why defensiveness is just the mind protecting itself, and how following your truth can be the most spiritual thing that you can do. Stay until the end. Mikah reframes what being a bad man actually means, and it's not what you think. Let's go. Welcome to Shut the Fuck Up and Listen, Mikah. It's great to have you on.
Happy to be here, dude. Happy to be here.
I want to jump straight in. There's something that you believe today in modern society. You believe that men are afraid to be bad men. What the fuck does that mean?
I'll speak as myself. I think I want to be as a person today, not like as high-end coach first. We have all, I used to always wonder why it was very, very hard for me to be able to just actually handle criticism from anyone in my life that I actually cared about. Why do I get so dysregulated? I'll cut them off, get defensive, shut down, get shameful, something. I had all the spectrum of reactions over the course of my life. And I was wondering where the hell all this was coming from. And I didn't start there. I had a nice little journey of other things first, but I found that bad men, I was essentially being afraid to be like my father, who I just defined in my mind as someone that was emotionally not present, inconsiderate of others, and does not care about women. And any time that a woman in my life or a partner, was sharing with me something that they wanted me to change a little bit, and something they didn't like about how I was showing up, I immediately thought that they were basically, without knowing my dad, calling me my dad. And my whole body would just freak out. And I wouldn't even know how to separate between those two things. And I've worked on that. And thankfully now I can handle, yes, the dysregulation and still hold the space that's necessary. But I found in a lot of work with people that that's a pretty common pattern. And I don't directly judge my father. And I was like, why do I not like my dad? Yeah, he did certain things that could have done differently, of course, and I think we've all done that in our life. But I realized most of my perspective of my father is coming from my mother. My mom had this very victim. She seemed powerless and weak whenever she's in the presence of my dad, and I felt like I had to pick up that burden. And she never really would say negative things about my father, but I found all of the subtleties of the stuff that scraps I had to pick up that he didn't really pick up, all just became these negative perceptions of my father from there. So it's this inverse way that we all develop, afraid of being bad men. It puts us in a position to struggle with intimacy. Things really what it ends up doing. It kind of robs us of it, the development of it.
There's so many questions that I would have from this, but I'd love to explore a little bit more, branching out from your perspective also into the men that you've worked with and, maybe the women as well. But do you think there's a quantifiable idea of what a bad man actually is?
To who? Both genders could say that that's what a bad man is? Is that the question?
Yeah, I guess either both genders or even just men themselves. Because I find the interesting thing here is I wonder whether we're facing an issue of everyone being afraid, because I agree with you. I think there is a fear of bad men, but I don't know if we've actually identified what a bad man actually is. And so it's almost like being afraid of the boogeyman, but the boogeyman has no identifiable characteristics. It's actually and so the boogeyman could be anything. And then all of a sudden we're just afraid, but there's no quantifiable bad man. And so I almost feel like if we're going to start a conversation about we believe that men are afraid of bad men, being bad men, I'd love to know, what is a bad man? Can we actually categorize that? Can we quantify that?
Let's see. Okay, first thought that comes to mind is a bad man is someone that makes women feel unsafe and hurts their feelings.
All right. All right. Let's tease this out. Let's tease this out. Keep
Yeah,
going.
I've never been asked a question like this. I was like, oh, let's do it. Like, that's interesting.
Bugger it. Let's do it. Makes women feel unsafe.
I think women have developed the language of that through some versions of their self-improvement journey, wherever that is. They've been kind of, men have received that as like, you make me feel unsafe.
Mm.
And which like, that's a whole other tangent of a concept. Like that's a very strange thing for, I think, most people to hear in general.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think it's kind of akin to, because this core feminine need of safety, right? And security. And they link very closely to this core feminine need of love, right? And it's something that I see a lot in my coaching is men feeling really hurt and demasculated or emasculated. Sorry, I don't think demasculated is a word, but they feel emasculated because a woman says to them, "I don't feel your love," but they're like, "I love you so much," or "I don't feel safe with you," but I love you so much. But I like, and then there's that. So it's it's almost an interesting thing because we're afraid of being bad men, but we're kind of afraid of being bad men through the eyes of the women.
Exactly.
In a weird way, and so I find that also interesting that your first one is, what makes a bad man is makes a woman feel makes a woman feel unsafe.
I think this movement is beautiful, but I also think there's been a counter to it. The feminism movement is wonderful. My family was a matriarchy, so it was ran by women, but had a lot of underdeveloped men. This rise of women being, I would describe to some degree, I think, more confident, yes, but also more masculine, just a little bit more driven. Men had to learn, especially their predominant parental figure that was around emotionally was the women. They had to learn how to be more feminine to be likable by them. Speaking for myself and speaking for quite a lot of other people, that process, I think in general, puts us in a position where most of being a man is measured based on the woman's experience of a man, not based on men's experience of men.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I decided to go with that, because I think that's probably the more relatable option, is that it's typically defined by another person's experience of you, not something that you define for yourself.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. I love your. I want to hear your takes on feminism because one of the things we had a chat on before we jumped on this call, we had a little meet and greet, and we were talking about not being afraid to say things I mean, we're on the Shut the Fuck Up and Listen podcast. We're not on the Let's Be All Nice Humans podcast. And this episode is going to be talk about being afraid to be bad men. So, then let's be a little bit bad and talk about things that we might not necessarily say somewhere else. What are your thoughts on modern feminism? Because I could see that there was something that you wanted to say, but you felt scared to say it. Maybe not scared, but there's hesitation as we all feel.
Yeah, I think just a healthy level of hesitation, right? The feminism as a movement feels like women in a way wanting power, but want the benefits of power, not actually power. It feels like I personally, I have found there are some women that really want to run a business and really do that, and that's fucking awesome. It's one of the coolest things. But then there's some that after they get to the heights of their career or something, it's more of an innate need for them to want to, if they want to have kids, which I know that's in the world that we're in right now, that's depending on the person, that's an interesting topic. They want to be a mom, a nurturer, to be taken care of. I think that that's the role that typically a lot of women do want, but they want the benefits that come from the feminist movement, which is equal rights, equal pay, equal responsibility. But there's something about that that's ultimately, I was asking a few people, I was asking a few female clients, I would describe them to be, I think they really resonate very strongly and identify strongly with that movement. Just systems thinking, right? What does that do for you? To really believe in this movement, to want the same pay, to want this, to want that. And it all just comes down to essentially they get to be a version of themselves that's taken care of. that's relaxed, that's loving and nurturing. So they're using this like power method of like trying to get equal pay and trying to get all these things so that they can at some point get these other feelings of nurturance. Feels like a backwards way of getting there. And it doesn't land. And when we see it, and like for some of them, when we play it out, it's like they realize that this method is not creating any of that in their life. It's creating like almost like polar opposite of it. And I think that that's a lot of what the movement has done. And it's a counter to a lot of, I think, just inconsiderate behavior by men.
Yeah, I have a kind of thing that me and my wife riff on, and yeah, I'll see what you think on this take. Something
Mhm.
that yeah, I feel like you're the perfect person to debut this kind of thinking. I believe that feminism is not actually driven by women. I think it's driven by systems men who just can't deal with women's emotions. So we make them turn them into men. I don't even believe feminism started with women. I have a straw hat belief that it started with men in corporate America who just couldn't deal with the emotions of a woman. So let's just turn them all into men. And it's the erosion of the feminine. It's the erosion of the feminine because the feminine is so like, if you're listening to the show, you're already asking the right question. How do I show up better? Maybe things feel harder than they should at home. Maybe you know something needs to shift, but you're just not sure where to start. Here's what I know. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you just never got the manual. Nobody teaches men how to be husbands. Nobody shows you how to navigate the hard conversations, regulate your emotions, or turn your marriage into an actual team. That's why I created Better Husband in 2-Minute Emails. It's one email every Saturday morning with one tool you can use that week. There's no therapy speak, no blame, just the skills that actually move the needle. 2 minutes, one Saturday morning, that's your entry point. Because 3 months of focused work beats 20 years repeating the same damn pattern. Links in the show notes. First email lands this Saturday. There's a lot to handle for somebody. You have to actually step up to be able to handle it. You actually have to, see the dark parts of yourself as a man and then hold them so that you can handle something so delicate and beautiful. And instead of doing that work, we just go, nah, everyone's a man now. Everyone's a man. You guys fight about that. We'll make them want to be a men, and we'll make that the predominant thing that they should want, to the point where, you know what, we all don't have to worry about actually looking at ourselves and holding this thing that is so beautiful. Let's erase it completely. Let's destroy it. And I almost look at it like that.
Do you think that men are doing that consciously?
God, no.
Okay. Okay. I was like, the way that that was framed, I was like, I pictured that being like a very unconscious thing.
I think that's I think it's quite an unconscious thing. I mean, it's interesting. My wife thinks it's a conscious thing. She always talks about the they and power and all of this. And I go, how do we quantify a they in power that does something like that? And I don't, and if it was something that was done, then, you know, you could start seeing how things like that could be done like 50, 60, 70 years ago. I think a lot of weird shit happened after World War II. In terms of advertising and that sort of thing. I don't know what was conscious and not conscious, but a lot of these things that set in motion around that time has resulted really, I think, in this. I think the result is of what I was saying, the erosion of the feminine. And if I'm honest, like if you look at it, it's like to be feminine and femininity, when it truly is feminine, it's something beautiful. And when I look at a feminist movement, there's so much anger and non-radiance, non-love, like beauty of what makes feminine that it just doesn't seem feminine to me.
Doesn't it?
It seems very masculine. It has none of the things that knowing any woman I've ever spoken to actually loves about what makes them a woman. It strips away that. And that's the weird thing about it. And that's what makes me go, well, wait, if it has nothing to do with women, what does it have to do with? You know?
I kind of like that take a lot. I like it because it's like, let's say in a moment, let's just picture, a typical corporate room, right? There's two people that are up for the same position. The man is going to choose the man out of like some level of primal reasons, some level of biased reasons. And then like there's just like the more and more that that person shows bias, and then let's say that guy is hired and she's not hired and she stays in her position. That starts it a little bit where it's like, I want this thing that I didn't get. But then also it's how the man handles the conversation when she comes to him and asks why I didn't get the position. And then it just kind of continues the erosion. And it's like just making you want it more and more. And, you know, the guy is getting triggered. So he's doing some form of deflection technique or like gaslight something, right? Insert label of behavior. And then it just creates more and more of a scarcity and not enoughness. And then creating a path of sheeping.
I mean, or it's literally it's that's always because the one before that is the women in the home, and you know, like I really do look at, like I love how, you know, when you listen to David Data or Robert Glover, all these sort of thinkings, they always talk about the three stages of man, essentially. I mean, I don't know if it's like specifically said, but it's always inferred, you know, that we had that really over exerting, controlling type man, which is that pre-1950s kind of man who is like, I'm the man in the house, I don't have any feelings. It's all spine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the kind of, you know, man that we all try and avoid, which interestingly enough, I think a lot of, like, I wondered whether you were going to go this way when I was talking about bad men, you know, because we all look at that as like is the bad men. We can kind of laugh at it. I think that's we look at that, we go, okay, we're not like that anymore. We're not these chauvinistic kind of men who just go, women needs to stay in the kitchen, you know, like that's, we can look at that and we can go, that's bad, quote unquote. But then the response to that has been the second movement, which we see, which is all the heart men, which is all these men that are just so filled with love, compassion, and empathy, but they give so much, but they have no spine whatsoever. They don't know what a challenge is. And in actual fact, that's half the men that I'm coaching at the moment. It's just men that, like, I'm talking to them and their women are like, can you just fucking lead? Can you do something? And he's just like, oh, but what do you mean? I've done everything for you for the last 20 years. And he has no backbone. It's like jelly, you know, and it's all heart. He cares so much, but he's lost any sense of self. There's no drive, nothing in there that makes him rigid, right, or anything. And so then, you know, then there's that third stage, which is, can we find some kind of man which has heart and spine together? This idea of conscious man, integrated man, something like this. And so if we're going to go back to the feminism analogy, I could imagine if there was a bad man within this, it would be that man that's so scared of the corporate analogy is like all the boardroom men going, gosh, I think the women want us to have feelings. So instead of that, why don't we get them to have no feelings? Why don't we get them to have no feelings? Let's create something like feminism. Let's get all those women to say they want jobs instead. And then that way we don't have to have feelings. But obviously then men started having feelings, and I don't know. So that was just my imagination of it. But in the end, the result is the same. Women have to act like men and lose the things that make them really, truly feel, in broad strokes, happy. And I'm not saying no woman should run a business. God, far from it. I'm just saying that it's like, on a whole, I see so many women that feel stuck, right? They feel stuck, and they feel stuck in some kind of rat race. And then their husband's also feeling stuck in some kind of rat race. And everyone seems to be so stuck. And I don't know how we get out of that.
Where do I want to start? One of the first things I think that comes to mind is like, it then leads to the path where like a lot of my clients, I could probably say the split is like 70% women, 30% men, which I would say a lot of the women are in relationships with men who at one point had a backbone and at some point lost it consciously, maybe never redeveloped it, maybe just didn't know how to, something. So the woman has become more of the initiator, which as she does more initiation, the more resentment that she builds, the more exhaustion that she has. And there's a unique balance that I think ends up coming into that space, because I want to make the day about men, so I want to make my...
Well, no, I mean, I think men listening to this also, by the way, if they can hear this and see themselves within this, they get a sense of understanding for their woman.
I found with a lot of the women, there's like they're almost they don't they're afraid to fall into the lead to follow your lead because they think they're going to lose their independence with it. So they have some resistance to it, and they end up creating environments where like she always has the last say, or she's still kind of controlling things. And what I found in general is like if you strip it, if we take it out of, masculine femininity and all of that, because that's just going on throughout life and inside of a person, I think that there is truth for everyone. And I think that that truth is found somatically. It's in your body. Your body is the only way that you can measure your experience of life. It has every layer of who you are. It's your mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, etc. Bringing everyone to find their deepest alignment with that, if I want to be dramatic, ends up women typically end up leading themselves back down the path of being more feminine. And it creates an influence in the relationship where the man is either now has the actual space to develop the backbone once again. Maybe the relationship has enough steady legs to build that process together, where the woman is so back into her true essence of who she wants to be, the life that she wants to live, that the relationship is now in misalignment. And I find that for a lot of women, they end up hitting the misalignment piece faster because it doesn't take that long for a woman to kind of get back into that space because she's willing to go into her body. And I think the path for men, it's not different than it is for women. It's not all about feelings in the same way. Like I think there's a very practical way to look at your body and your feeling. I describe this to people as your body is either telling you one of three things: yes, no, or let's see. That's it. That's its response to typically everything. We could say no's are when your body is getting super tight. It clams down, a fast heart rate. Like you just feel like your chest is caving in. We would call that in coaching and in therapy contracting. Or it's a yes, which this is a mix of a word where you can add a little bit more of whatever you technically want this to be, because some men just want to be really grounded. Maybe they don't want to have a lot of joy. Fine, you don't want to have a lot of joy. But typically the group for men is groundedness, security if they think that's a feeling, confidence if they think that's a feeling. Those are states of being in my mind. Peace, joy. That's it. If they can have those things, perfect. And your body responds to that a very particular way. Maybe they've had some moments of it, but they haven't really had consistency with it. And I think the lack of consistency with them being able to feel and embrace these emotions is where the backbone gets lost, because it can't really ever be developed. I used to think when I was like younger and only in the spiritual world, like the loving thing to do is to always say yes to someone. And I found that like the more often I said yes when my body was giving me a no, the more I was just cutting my spine in half over and over. And I'm actually finding that no is sometimes the most yes thing to do.
It's actually an interesting thing that I see with men, and I face it. I think it was Wednesday. I had a day of like 6 or 7 coaching calls in a row. And it was one of those interesting days where almost every single person had the same theme. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, where it's like you're literally just scratching your head because you find yourself feeling like a broken record because you're saying the same analogy, same thing over and over again to somebody who's saying the same thing back at you. But essentially this whole day was like, well, I don't know what I want in life. I don't know what I want in life. Like, how can you say it? Like, how can I, because I have this whole thing about like when men are, let's say, too far into being attached or tethered to their wife's emotions. It's almost as if, their wife wants them to lead, but then what's happening is they're like a boat. They drop their anchor, and they should be dropping their anchor into something that's solid, that has some kind of like a solid ground. But instead, they're dropping their anchor into a submarine, which is their wife's emotions. And the submarine is like going everywhere, and they're just like flying around, and they're only happy when she's still, and they're only, and when she's not, they're like they're awful. So I found myself saying that over and over again. And then they kept going, well, but then if I like, what is that thing that I get to anchor into that, and wait, what do I want in my life? And what is all this? And I find a lot of resonance in what you said about the yes, no, and the let's see, because I think, and also the building the spine through the no, because I found that the biggest thing that I had to say to people was, well, to find what you want, an easier way of getting there is actually really defining your no's, defining your no's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment you define your no's, you create a scope. And yes, if you might not be able to articulate a yes, because sometimes you're right, the men, if they feel content, with whether I want 50K a year or whether I want 500K a year, like I could have either, or whether I want this or that, I could have either. But what is your no? And so for one client is like living with the parents of your partner. Is that a no? Yeah. That's a fucking no. It's like, well, then that's a no. You do know there is something that you want. There is something that you want, right? So what do you see with that?
I find that, like, going off of your anchor analogy, right? No puts you in the best position possible to receive your partner's submarine of an experience. You were as rooted as possible. Because you couldn't have said something that is more true to you in that moment. I honestly would say, like, you're triggered and you get defensive because you're flailing in the wind, not because you're rooted. There's no need to get defensive if you know what your no is. That's part of it. But sometimes at some point, if you just tell someone no, right, it's like, this is my no. And it's like the conversation just starts because you said no. It doesn't really finish because you said no. This is where I think the idea of compromise or creativity kind of, I think, steps into the mix. Because if this is something you're not willing to tolerate or put up with or have in your guys' dynamic, what is your yes? What would make this more of a yes? What do you want to do with that? And you want to try, and the goal of it is, when you're having that conversation that's continued with your partner after you've already expressed the no, is getting yourself closer and closer to your body being more relaxed, maybe more open. That's a sign that idea is probably a yes or a very far over let's see. That's the space that you want to get to somatically, because that's not going to have any resentment. There's no blame down the line that you're going to have for her because you decided to take her side or go with her suggestion. I think it's a really nice pocket to be. No gives you your scope, and then you build the bigger scope of what your yes is off of that.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, if you're grounded in a no and you understand yourself, because sometimes we say no just as a knee-jerk reaction, right? We say no, and we actually, it's not that we say we mean no. It's more that there is something behind you that is uncomfortable, or that is a no. And I think maybe the deeper thing behind this is actually to understand yourself, to understand your body, to understand these gut things. Because I love how you say, like, no starts a conversation, because it often does, and I truly believe the worst thing you can do is not honor that no and slip or drift straight into a yes just to shut your woman up.
Yep.
Just because it's too hard. Just because it's too, okay, we'll deal with it. Because the thing is, it's like, I feel like the feminine is a beautiful, beautiful sparring partner for you to be able to actually find out exactly what it is you truly want. So the moment that you say no and your wife goes, what do you mean no? She's like testing your no. It's friction. It's not like, now I have to capitulate, because again, she'll freaking judge you for capitulating. She doesn't want a man who just capitulates. But at the same time, she also wants to get her way too. So it's this lovely little dance that starts. But at that point, you can hear what she has to say, because she'll tell you what she has to say. That's another beautiful thing about the feminine.
Never sort of word.
Oh, she will tell you exactly what she wants to say. But if you have a strong understanding of who you are, you can then, with the new information that your wife has come up with, redecide. Is this still a yes or is still a let's see or still a no? And I think that's the thing that maybe people miss is that as soon as they get friction, and here's the thing, no spine because there's no ability to handle the friction.
Yeah. Yeah.
No ability to handle the friction. Which again goes back to what we were talking about. We're talking about these three stages of men. And I want to take this back to bad men because I'm looking at this and I'm going, I still believe all spine is bad. All heart with no spine is bad too.
Yes.
Because if you don't have a spine and you can't handle friction, you're just people pleasing and you're saying yes, but you're actually resenting and she will resent you too.
Yes.
It's not authentic.
It's not. And that's
It's not truth.
And I think that's really what, like, the greatest gift you can ever give anyone is your truth. Because then what's required of them is to give you their truth. It's like if you want someone to be honest with you, commitment to honesty matches that, right?
It's all good. I'm writing down that. That was a beautiful thing. The greatest gift you can give anyone is your truth. You also had a lovely cracker of a line before, which was your body is the only way you can measure your life. Love those two. Love those two.
Those were developed over just so many years, man, of like,
Yeah, we're putting them on a meme straight after this.
oh, I really find that, like, you know, if you're going to, like, you know, when you were going with 3 layers of men, it means that essentially over the course of time, we've always been trying to figure out how do we get as many people as possible productive, efficient, happy, whatever the goals are of that city, state, country. How do we get as many people doing that as possible? Well, you have to create societal standards. You have to create agreed upon morality. And this is where I think we're getting to some middle ground of a world where the more that you follow your truth, the less videos you're probably going to see on the internet that actually align with what is true for you. Sometimes, depending on what it is, of course, I think there's something that are just rules for most people or patterns for most people. But sometimes the thing that you want and the thing that's like the total yes for you is the thing that, like, someone's going to be like, well, it kind of like makes you an asshole. Like, that kind of, like, I don't like that. And I think it just brings me back. It's so funny. It's a theme in my own life. Remember the book, The Courage to Be Disliked? It was like, I think, like,
I actually read that for the first time quite recently, like 2 months ago.
Oh, I've read it so many years ago, so I'm not being able to, like, reference it super well, but just the concept of, like, what, like, following the rhythm of your own heart in the life that you want to live, allowing yourself to follow that puts you in the best position to handle any circumstance from there. But I also would say, like, I pair that with, like, you don't want to get, especially because if you're in a marriage or you're in a committed relationship, you need to pair that truth with consideration. There are things that, and this is where I think sometimes we can find ourselves in a, like, outside of just like what's your no and outside of what like your yes is to something. Sometimes I think I can go 2 ways with this. But, like, men get caught up in blaming someone, blaming their wife in this case, for their own lack of accountability or taking action on their truth in the life that they want to live, so that they feel like they've done everything for their partner. It's not like you have to overly course correct and only do stuff for yourself. If you're going to do something for another person, you do it under the intention of service. Like, that concept has felt so big for me. It can turn something that is kind of like a no into something that is a yes because you've changed your relationship with how you're going to show up to this thing.
I think what we touch on here is, which is really interesting, and you know, and the whole theme for today is bad men, and interesting enough, like I also trained with like Dr. Anna Rubinstein with the boy to man model, and then we're talking about masculine and feminine, and then we're talking about, you know, all these different models and way to see the world and all of this, and you know, these 3 stages of man and all of that. Interestingly enough, and I'll get your take on this, I believe that these are all archetypes. These are archetypal, it's like a way of doing archetypal psychology or philosophy so that we can identify parts of ourselves within them, find some meaning of purpose within our life, and move towards them as ideals or standards as long as they fit within what the blueprint within each of us actually feels is right or wrong. So they become tools that help us get to where we want to go based on our gut instincts and the feelings within us. So they're not reality, like there is no such thing as masculine, feminine. We literally just have, like, there is, but there isn't. These are amalgamations of archetypes based on a bunch of different things. And I think with that, if we put that in mind, like, I think it goes right back to exactly your line here, which I think is the fundamental thing of the day, is your body is the only way you can measure your life.
It simplifies everything. I've done, how many, there's so many personality tests out there. I'm an INFJ. If you ask Myers-Briggs, I am a Vector. If you ask human design, I am a Gemini mixed with this thing and this thing and this thing. If I'm astrology, you can ask me questions about that. And it's all of these archetypes about stuff. But I find that, like, I agree completely with your point of, like, the purpose of them. I think they serve a really good purpose, but they serve a purpose of awareness. They don't serve a purpose of utility. Like, you can't do anything with that. Like, I think a measurement is nice, but it's still someone else decided upon your standards.
Isn't this interesting? Is there? I'm just going to ask you a quick question that just came up, which I think I've never heard before. Do you think there is utility in understanding, in being understood, and having and feeling as if you are understood? Because that's what they're providing, right?
I would argue no.
Yeah, that's almost like a little bit of wank, isn't it?
I would argue no, knowing that, like, I'm here now, and, like, but I find archetypal information. Oh, I say this: more people, you don't need to be understood if you live in your body. Like, that's not even a desire that you have. It doesn't come.
Yeah, but so many people so far away from their bodies that we feel like we need to understand so that we get back into the body.
Exactly. So that's the goal of it, is it's the bridge that gap.
Yeah, it's always bring it back to your body, but because most people have no fucking idea how to, we need to actually get them back there through things of being understood, because otherwise you and I wouldn't have a job.
Exactly.
And if everyone just connected with their body, we wouldn't have a job.
Exactly. I would get to go live in the woods. I'd be totally fucking fine with that. So I would be totally fine with that. But in ways, there is a purpose to this. Like, I ask so many clients, it's one of the first things on every freaking call. They'll tell me something that they want. It's perfectly fine, whatever it is. I want to be happy. I want to be loved. I want to be this. I want to be that. I want $1 million. Who gives a fuck what it is, bro? It doesn't really matter to me. At the end of the day, when we start to get to the questions of what does that make you feel, or what does that feel like in your body, I get everything but an emotion. I get a story about a feeling. Like, I feel like I would have this, like, water flowing through my body. What are you talking about, my guy? Like, the feeling, it's stories about this, it's stories about that. It's like, how would you describe that in emotions? Comes back to the same as I said earlier. Groundedness, joy, peace. It's not very different, especially for men. It's not very different than that. And then when you ask them, because that's one thing, right? Like, a feeling is like, or an emotion is like part of it, but it's like still adjacent to the body in a way. So this is what it feels like for me. Where do you feel that the most? And how would you describe that as a texture, as a temperature, as a sensation? When you have that answer, that's your actual measurement for your life. You can build stuff around that. Because if you don't have that, you'll get wavered in all of these other things.
Yeah. We're so, like, I mean, this is where the whole battle of the head and the body come in, and in a weird way, I'm reading the Tao for another time, and it always talks about just like the mentor hilariously is speaking, and yet if the world was perfect, he wouldn't even need to speak, because essentially he knows that even speaking itself, yes, you're trying to say the most pure thing that you can, but even speaking itself is of the mind rather than literally just listening to the blueprint within and the way within. And yet we must speak, and yet we must continue to battle and do all of this because it's just how we communicate. It's how we go through this all.
Ooh, can I riff on that really quickly?
Please do.
That brings me to this thing that I heard like maybe 5, 6 years ago now, which was like defensiveness is the making of the mind. Is like it's as a concept. It is like if you and if language was no longer happening between two people and your partner was just saying sounds, you couldn't understand what she was saying, and you were just saying sounds, all you would have is your body's experience of that. And you're kind of like, like you would feel some kind of way about that. And then you would maybe engage accordingly. But the words add this whole other thing to it that makes it like, I'm not good enough. And it makes it about this thing and it makes it about that thing. And like, I think the words, they're helpful, I think communication, language. I think language is beautiful. I'm learning two others right now. I think it's a beautiful thing. But ultimately, if you stripped everything and everyone was just making sounds, then they're just saying words with sounds with intent towards you. If you don't like the intent, you could just ignore it.
Or what is it that is it someone like Confucius or Buddha said it? Like a gift doesn't, words are like a gift, or insults are like a gift, and you can choose to open the box or not, or you could,
Yep.
know.
Like negative energy is someone handing you a letter and you decided to pick it up. Like it's you accepted the invitation to the table. I make it super simple whenever people bring up to me, he's like, oh, they like really pissed me off. And I'm like, it just sounds like you accepted an invitation. This is what it sounds like. I try and make it simple. I try and not add all of this other stuff to the way that I work with people because it's just there's actually
Yeah. Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, I'm literally as well in the middle of writing tomorrow's Better Husband email. And tomorrow's Better Husband email is about the proverbial shit pile, I call it, which is essentially, I just believe that everybody in this world has a proverbial shit pile that they have, and their shit pile could be filled with their shadow, it could be filled with, traumas, it could be filled with the responsibilities, their what they should do, their purpose, the things that are theirs, that they're shit, not anybody else's shit, their shit. And so I think this world would be a better place if we all just could identify what is our proverbial shit pile and other people's proverbial shit pile. And so if somebody's going to pick up some of their proverbial shit and fling it at you, you can work out, do you need to then go start shoveling their shit, or do you just continue shoveling your shit? Because in the end, that's the only way through. So I think it's but every fucking point, Micah, always comes back to you've got to identify that in your body.
you do. It's the call that I had right before this. It was with a woman. Her husband experiences low self-esteem. I'm not gonna tell the whole situation, but like there's a pattern of that in the relationship. She's doing more of a leader role right now. When he first finally was able to communicate and he tried it's just where he is in his awareness journey, I'll just say it like that. He was trying to blame her for his drinking. Her body rejected that shit so quickly because it does not, like, your body does not pick up other people's stuff. It's like, fuck out of here. Like that's not me. Her body literally relaxed and was like, no, but that's not mine. And she felt that in her core. But the only way that she knew that is because she was in touch with this enough that she didn't let this take over. She didn't let her mind take over. And it became about this whole other thing. It's, when I first was doing when I was starting to add somatics into work with people, I was really worried that when I was like first learning like the trainings and learning from my mentors, like I thought we were going to do some of those videos, people like, the dramatic, like just the really dramatic, overly spiritual things is what it seems like. Yeah. Like, I don't want to be like that because you don't need to do all that to make some change. And I had to really make sure. And when I learned, if we can just make everything really simple and you build simplicity around everything, I have my clients now, they communicate to me in a way I can just tell it's really centered for them because they don't act like it's my idea anymore. They're like, yeah, I had 2 things this week that were just like a total no. but they're things that I really care about and I really want to explore how I can make them yeses. Literally their words. And I was like over the moonly happy about that. Because that's someone that is looking at things accountably, but is also not making anything overly complicated. It's just about preferences.
But then also living the human experience of acknowledging that it's not something you have solved or fixed yet, and that it's something to work through, you know, and there's a lot to work through in this human experience. It's not something you can just switch from yes to no in a thing like that. We need people. We need to talk to people and have things like that. I want to back on the somatic work. Hilariously, like my wife went to a somatic workshop and she was so excited for it. So she's jumping into the whole feminine side of things, and she's brilliant. She's just this. She's truly jumping into femininity in its, if you know anything of like Hindu gods or whatever, in its Kali kind of nature. She just loves this idea of just going, hey, like, I'm unashamedly gonna be fucking chaotic feminine, you know? Like, that's what she wants. And I'm like, good on her. She's gonna take the good, the bad, everything together. But anyway, she went to the somatic workshop and she's like, she said to me at the beginning in a very dry German way, I really fucking hope it's not gonna be this kind of for the people just listening, what I did was like throw my body up and down because that's what sometimes happens at performative somatic work.
Yes, I think
Performative
that's a
somatic
fair
work.
way to put it. Yeah. Yeah.
Performative somatic work. So she did it and then she came back and she went, it was that. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But I had the same experience when I moved to Bali and the first thing I would have considered myself to be quite spiritual when I first moved to Bali, and I mean, my mother's a psychic tarot reader. Like she's got 1.3 million followers on TikTok. She's been a tarot reader for her whole life, and that's how I kind of grew up. And regardless of how I view it now, you know, it was quite something I was like, oh, I'm quite a spiritual guy. And then I got to Bali, and I saw everybody like writhing on the floor. I saw people with their heads really essentially in the clouds, and it felt so far removed from what my gut knew was spirituality. And I like left spirituality for a very long point in time because it felt like a club, like some kind of clique at school, you know, and you have to be cool to do it. And and then I realized what it was later and years later and in the last couple of years, I realized spirituality is actually not anything. It's no woo, it's no religion or whatever. It's a fundamental truth of connection to self, connection to other people. If we're going to talk about that, the courage to be disliked, the end of that book is essentially we are all one and a connection to everyone else, having a responsibility to self for your own purpose and a responsibility for the community to give your purpose away. And that is what I believe is spirituality. And everything like religion, breath work, meditation, somatic, anything that is labeled spirituality are literally just tools to help you get to that feeling.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I, when it comes to spirituality for me, I think I went through most of the gamut. And I would say I was, say it, I'm going to say this in a way. Yeah, I'm going to say this a little bit more accountably. I had an experience with spirituality where I thought the answer was to only have the high, good feelings. If I could have that all the time, then I must be enlightened. That's where I started. And I think that's like, I would describe as like a very westernized desire because you don't really learn that in Asia. You don't really learn that. Like it comes from the West, that type of like attachment to the good only. And I never really clicked super well with like, I think spiritual people in like those communities trying to do a lot of that stuff. Like that just never really made a lot of sense to me. I always thought that like spirituality was very much a individual journey. It has nothing to do with other people. That's where I started. And I got decently far and I found myself like being able to actually shut off my mind. Plenty of fun things that like I think monks work at because I was doing that for a little bit of my life. but I also found myself like spirituality is just like it's ultimately living a life as close to your truth as possible. That is that's the most spiritual thing you can do. Meditation, I meditate pretty routinely because I really enjoy it right now. I went like a couple years without really doing none of it. I did yoga for quite a bit, but now like I like sitting there, just enjoying the breath, letting things go by, because it just feels true for this moment. It doesn't need to be who I am, or I'm not expecting it to give me anything. And I mean that leads to like a whole other thing about I think people's relationship with tools. I think we have a very codependent relationship with tools. It's kind of like breath work has my peace. I don't have peace. Like, is it, or even meditation or anything?
Mm.
And then it's almost kind of like it's borrowed. So you get
Mm.
a bit, but then you go right back to whatever.
Yeah, and then imagine you going on a holiday and you don't have access, or it's like you're difficult, you can't meditate, or you don't have breath work ability to do that because things in life get rushed, and then what? You're just going to give away all that sense of.
Exactly.
Mm.
And then you just realize that you were essentially just operating off of a borrowed experience. And that's your doing. And it's your relationship to it. I described this to one of the clients because she tried everything. We'd have like breath work on Tuesdays, therapy on this day, and psychic medium on Friday. It was so routine. I was like, whoa, that's a lot. But we worked at it slowly. But I essentially brought up that concept to her and I just invited her. I was like, you might enjoy this idea. And this comes back to the thing I was saying about service.
Mm.
Breathwork is you don't just take something from breathwork. Breathwork requires something of you. You are being of service to that space. For you to participate in breathwork requires you, yes, to have a calm environment and things, but your willingness to breathe, your
Mm.
willingness to be peaceful, your willingness to relax.
Mm.
So it's taking it out of this external thing, and this is the thing that's creating it, and I'm bringing that to the environment. So now when I
Mm.
walk away, I have it either way because I'm being of service to each moment or being of service to the tool.
Mm.
I find that like that concept I learned from, do you know who Flynn Skidmore is? Oh, I'll send you his stuff, dude.
Please do.
He's one of my first mentors actually. And this is one of the few concepts he was bringing up to me, I think like early on in the work. He used an example of like the podcast where like he used to have a lot of resistance to like making a podcast and talking and different things. When he got through some of like the topic resistance and stuff, he had like this fear of a microphone and it's like fear of the headphones and fear of his voice being seen. And I was like, he's just making it all about him and his fears and stuff. He actually started to personify the microphone. What does the microphone want to experience? What sounds does it want me to reverberate into it? How does it want me to take care of it? And it shifted his perspective from gaining and losing, which I describe as insecurity when you're focused on
Mm.
doing something, and being of service to something. When you're in service of something, you always show up what's needed. Like, no matter
Mm.
what, you can always do that. It's like I always say to people when they're like, I feel like I can't do that. Let's say right now, middle of this call, your friend texts you saying, I have the biggest emergency of my life. They call you. All of a sudden, your stress, your worries, whatever the fucking problems are going on in your life, you can put that to the side for a second. And all of a sudden, you have presence, space, patience, curiosity, questions, solving. All of these things are abundantly available to you now.
Mm.
Interesting. Right environment, clear on how to show up for it. Service. You're able to do that. And I think that's something that more people can benefit from. The idea of being of service to something and knowing how to create a relationship with things so that you can be of service to it.
I love that. I love that. And I think even in that in example that you were talking about of that woman who is like clockwork doing everything. I think there's also a lot of wisdom to be found in the thing that you're avoiding. And so if she were to have a look at her schedule, there doesn't look like there's any space. Look at that. It's like if you want to be in service of anything, be in service of what you're avoiding. Because if that's space, then and I think that's the other thing is I'm looking at all these tools and I realize that like any tool that's ever worked for me tends to be the one that I am resisting the most.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to do breath work. Yeah, breathwork wants you to do it.
And if you just, in the resistance, it's literally like 10, 15 minutes of discomfort max.
Yeah.
Get over that. It's like the Pomodoro. Like they prove that it's 15 minutes of accepting discomfort and resistance.
Mhm.
You can do that. You've now put yourself into flow. I think it's the same thing with like, it's 10 to 15 minutes of you being uncomfortable with this thing you have resistance to. And all of a sudden it will start to change you after that.
Yeah.
Meditation when I think I was probably resisting it for a time too. I was like, oh no, I don't want to sit there and do that. And then one day, I mean, I'm a little bit more of I've done it for a while, so I know I enjoy longer sessions. So like, fuck it, 2 hours.
Hmm.
Put the timer on for 2 hours, shut the fuck up and just sit there. First 20 minutes, like hell was I fighting that.
Hmm.
Every thought, getting lost into everything, judging the fact that I'm not focusing on my breath or whatnot. And then at some point, I just, here we are. Okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? That's next. And everything just became much more like it is.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I can feel I'm comfortable now. Just like, we're like, yeah, I could keep trying to do that.
100%. Well, we are going to hop off pretty soon. But before we do, Micah, we have to come back to the original question. I like this as a new format for this show, by the way. This podcast has actually given me an idea of how I want to take Shut the Fuck Up and Listen going forward in the future. Starting it with a question, allowing ourselves to divulge into whatever we talk about, and then right at the end coming back to the question. Let's come back to the question. So with everything that we've sort of gone through today, you believe that men are afraid to be bad men. What do you mean by that?
I think that men, and my answer is changing now.
Good.
I think that men are afraid that their truth is something that will hurt other people in their life and something that will get them to be isolated from others. And that fear of losing someone that they care about puts them in a situation where they're going to start to overvalue how other people feel above themselves. And that is what we could say is the closest thing to a bad man, someone who is not rooted, has no backbone, and it's someone that is not honoring their truth because their lack of truth puts everyone else in a position where it's going to be hard for them to access theirs.
Thank you for your time today, Micah.
Of course, man. This is great.
That's the episode. That's all I got for you today. I just want you to remember you're not alone in this. Make sure you subscribe to stay connected, of course, and comment your win, because every time a man sees other men winning, they don't feel alone anymore, and I love that. Tools are in the show notes, starting with the Better Husband in 2-minute emails. Let's build this together. I'll see you next week.